Good to be with you this morning. Thankful for the presence of everyone. Getting a better and better crowd out each week, seems like, and we're thankful that things are going well, and we hope that they'll continue to do better, and that we will see a decrease, especially in this virus, and an increase in our zeal for God. Thankful for the presence of folks here, and thankful for the presence of people that are able to watch this via the live stream and the technology that makes that possible. And I have said for a long time that I believe God deserves the use of the latest technology. I used that when I spent $500 for a color printer back in 1992. I had a hard time getting Deanne to believe that, but and now that same printer is about $69.95 at Walmart. But I believe that God deserves the very best that we can give Him in all these ways, and this media is another way. Somebody walked up to me right before I was getting ready to start and said, "I hope that guy doesn't take another step." And that's really the subject today. Will we take another step? The way that seems right. Did you hear that? I had Alfred read those other verses because it's all wisdom literature. It's all things that we need to hear. And end with verse 12. There is a way that seems right to man, but its end is the way of death. You know, that same verse is repeated word for word just 2 chapters later in chapter 16, verse 25. Which tells me it must be pretty important, and probably most of you have heard it, right? Do something so I know you're awake. Yeah, most of you have heard it. But have you ever just taken a few minutes and sat down and said, all right, there's a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. What is involved in that? How is that truth demonstrated? Let's say you come to this fork. I've come to many forks like this in the woods, and you've got to go one way or the other. The fact is, you've got to make a choice. You don't want to just keep going and blaze a new path. You're going to take one. Well, let me just say that. Let's say that this path over here, going this way, that it starts to go uphill very quickly. It seems like it's in the opposite direction of the way that you came. You think maybe you hear some animal out there, which I always do when I'm in the woods. And that just does not seem like a good option for you. So you lend an ear this other way, and you hear water running. And you remember, well, there was water where I came from, and that seems more like the way. So you say, I'm going to go down that path. And so you launch off through there. And it's not long you come to a ravine and there is a log across it. And so you decide, well, this seems to be the right way, even though it's become more difficult. I'm going to go. And you balance and make your way across the log. And as you step off the log on the other side, the log shifts and it falls down into the ravine. There's no way back. And as you go forward, you realize that the water that you heard is a waterfall, too far for you to try to go down, and now there's nowhere to go. Well, who's at fault? I mean, you used your very best judgment, right? You looked at all the options. You did what you thought was best, but look where you are now. Have you ever found yourself in a situation similar to that, maybe not in the woods, but just in your life? Well, I think that demonstrates what's going on in this. There's a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. The fact of the matter is, some things are just not the way they seem, like that right fork in the path. You know, the Bible gives us all kinds of teaching about what God wants from us. It teaches us responsibility in our lives. It teaches us responsibility in the roles that we have, men and women, husbands, fathers, wives, mothers, all the various areas of our lives. It teaches us honesty and loyalty and faithfulness and love. You find this everywhere in the Bible. The teachings of Christ, the writings of the Old Testament prophets, the wisdom literature contained in the Proverbs in various places. The Bible is really an instruction manual for teaching us what we need to do to be God's people. But it's also a book of warning. There are statements in the Bible that are strictly designed to make us aware of the potential danger. You ever notice when you're driving your car that usually a long way before it actually happens, it says, right lane closed ahead. So if it says right lane closed ahead, what do you need to do? You need to start making your way over into the left lane, right? And not like that guy that zooms by everybody and at the last second goes, yeah. That's not the purpose of the sign. The sign is a warning that you're going to have to make a change. You should probably do it now. The Bible does that as well. There are a lot of statements throughout the Bible and entire passages devoted to that. For example, in Matthew chapter 25, as that chapter begins, it says, "The kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom." Now, as you know probably, that story is not about wedding ceremony etiquette. That story, that parable, is to show how the kingdom of heaven is for prepared people, people that look ahead and make plans. And there's a warning given in that you don't want to be like the 5 foolish virgins who did not prepare and found themselves in a bad place when the bridegroom finally came and eventually were shut out altogether. You have passages like 1 Corinthians chapter 10, where it says, "Moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that all our fathers were under the cloud, all passed through the sea, all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. But with most of them God was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. These things became our examples." So you have there a warning, a complete passage about going back and looking at the Israelites that came out of Egypt, that were offered salvation and freedom, and yet they persisted in their sinful ways and gave up on all that. Paul says, I want you to think about that because I want to warn you. I don't want you to imitate them. They have become an example for us, but an example of what not to do. So not only are we given that positive teachment, we're also given words of warning. And the first thing that I think of this proverb is a word of warning, and that is that some things are not what they seem to be. Take a look at these 2 picturesque scenes here. One, this beautiful frozen pond. The other, this nice icy mountain stream. Now, when you look at those, what do you see? Well, I would say to you that there are various things that you could see. For example, when you look at that pond, do you see water that's frozen solid, or do you see a thin layer of ice? If you were trying to make a decision about whether to cross, you would have to decide, wouldn't you? Is that frozen solid or is it a thin layer of ice? Now, you first look at it, you say, well, there's snow on the ground, there's snow here. It looks like it's frozen pretty good. I think I'll venture out there. But after you get out there about 10 or 15 feet, you might notice, well, this ice right here is a different color. And you might look over here and notice there's some water showing through right there. That's not a good sign. That can't be good. But then it's too late because you hear and next thing you're in the water. Well, you made the best decision you thought that you could. What about over here? You've been wandering through here, you're hot, you're thirsty, and you see this water. Well, you know, water running down from a mountain, trickling past all these rocks. Mountain water, what's better than that? So it's got to be pure water, right? Is there the possibility that this could be non-potable water, full of germs and amoebas and things that could make you sick? Well, you say it's come down out of the mountains, it's flowing past these rocks, it provide kind of a natural filter. It's got to be all right. So you drink it. But now what you may not have noticed is that this little pool here is not in the main stream. It's come off over here and it's just sitting. You notice how this has got ripples, but this is just sleek like glass? That's not good. You going to drink or not? You see, life is filled with these decisions, and if I'm going to rely purely on human wisdom and experience, I can tell you right now, we're not going to make the right decision. Many times, we're not going to make the right decision. Some things are not as they seem. There's a proverb, Proverbs 23, beginning in verse 26. Proverbs 23:26. Here's some of your wisdom literature. My son, give me your heart and let your eyes observe my ways, for a harlot is a deep pit, and a seductress is a narrow well. A deep pit. That's probably not somewhere you'd want to fall in, is it? A narrow well. That does not, I don't want to fall in any kind of well, narrow or otherwise. Verse 28, she also lies in wait as for a victim and increases the unfaithful among men. Now, when you think about somebody turning aside to a harlot, you think, well, they're just doing that of their own free will. They're doing what they want. Not when she's waiting for a victim. You may think you're doing what you want. It's like a fly landing on a Venus flytrap. The fly says, I get to fly wherever I want. I'm going to land right here. Well, great, the flower says. The harlot, the seductress, she's waiting for a victim. Verse 29, who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who has complaints? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? So on and so forth. You decide you're going to do what you want, but you're going to pay the price for it. Now, let me go back over here and bring you back up to verse 6. Do not eat the bread of a miser, nor desire his delicacies. Now, bread, that should be fine, right? Man lives by bread. We need bread. What's wrong with eating anybody's bread? Verse 7, as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. Here's bread. Somebody's telling you, I got this fresh bread. Won't you have some? What is wrong with that? I'm hungry. He's offering. Why can't I eat his bread? Here's why. Verse 8, the morsel you have eaten, you will vomit up and waste your pleasant words. You see, as he thinks in his heart, so is he. What he said was, eat and drink. But in his heart, he's saying, as soon as he takes a bite of that, he's going to die. The truth is in the heart, not what's on the outside. The bread is not what it seems to be. Don't we have a fairy tale about that? About some shiny apple that some poor unsuspecting girl ate and then slept forever? It's what's inside, what's true, that matters, not what is just on the outside. Things are not always what they seem to be. Now, I want you to make a application or several applications of that idea. What about in entertainment? Well, it's okay to be entertained. For example, I used to like football before they all became a bunch of prima donnas and decided that it's a political stage. Now I don't watch football, and don't you either. But let's say you did like football. Do you know when they play National League football? They play on Sunday. Now you say there's nothing wrong with football. It's an honest game, honest sport. They're going to go out there and, engage in activities, exercise, and I enjoy watching it. But they only do it on Sunday. It took me a long time to get these tickets. I paid a lot of money for them. Surely God won't miss me one assembly. Aha. That sounds like the devil said, eat and drink, and then you vomited up your pleasant words. The devil said, just one Sunday. You gave God 51 Sundays. What's one Sunday? Where I grew up in Columbus, Indiana, just 40 miles north of us, every year, just a little before this time, they have this big, huge race that everybody likes to go to. It's called the Indy 500. Guess when they run the Indy 500? Always on Sunday. And I was shocked as a young lad. I was a young lad once. That when we would go to church on that Sunday, there were some people that every year were not there because they chose to go to the Indy 500. I had to have a talk with my mom and dad about this when I was really, because I thought, these people that I'm thinking about, they're very well respected. They've been Christians for a long time. So it must be all right, right? Mom and dad said, no, it's not all right. Don't you think you're going to try it? What I'm saying is that there are things that are not as they seem to be. Recreation can be good and wholesome, but what about when it takes me away from the Lord? Language that seemingly has not a positive or negative effect, if it does not build up the hearers but tears down. Morals suggested by the world that seem to be okay. You know, when I was young, no one would have ever suggested that a homosexual lifestyle is okay. And everyone seemed to understand, you know, if you can't be in a relationship that, all things being equal, can procreate, then there's something wrong with that. You know, if you go down on the farm and the bull has got eyes for another male bull, something wrong with that. It's not even right for a bull to like a sheep, let alone another bull. But now everybody says that's okay because we love each other, we have feelings that way, whatever. There's a way that seems right in a man's eyes, but its end is the way of death. Religious practices. I have heard of people going to Rome and they want to see the Pope and they want to be one of the ones that gets to kiss his ring because they think that's some great honor. People have been doing that a long time. Must be all right, right? They claim that the papacy has descended from the Apostle Peter. Peter would be appalled. Peter wouldn't even let Cornelius bow down to him. I can tell you without fear of contradiction, he wouldn't let him kiss his ring. There's things wrong with that. Things are not always what they appear. 2 Thessalonians chapter 5 and in verse 21. 2 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 21. No, something must be wrong with that. Because this says there is no 2 Thessalonians 5:21. Well, you start in Matthew and you'll come to it. I know a good one. 1 John chapter 4 and verse 1. This is the problem with live broadcasts. See, I would have cleaned all this up in post-production. 1 John 4 and verse 1. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. Test the spirits. That's the idea of some things are not as they seem. We studied Galatians this morning in our Bible class. There were people there that said, as a Christian, you have to go back and keep the law of Moses and be circumcised. Things were not as they seem. That's part of this warning. There's a way that seems right, but its end is the way of death. Secondly, man is not the highest surveyor of life. We think that we know, but we don't always know. We think that we can assess things, but we can't. There are human philosophies, humanism for one, that basically makes man the center of the universe and has man as the one that can see all and know all. And these approaches make man the highest surveyor or assessor of life. The problem is this: that which seems right to me as a man may in reality be a way of death. I remember when all this corona stuff first started, and people trying to help out started making cloth masks. And you will not find it anywhere on the CDC site now or on the Surgeon General's site. But make no mistake, they did say that cloth masks were completely ineffective. Now they have changed their mind and they endorse that kind of thing. You know why that is? Because they're fighting the novel coronavirus. Novel means new. They have zero experience with the coronavirus. And so somewhere, even though you and I are not privy to it, there is a dartboard with these very learned scientists going, mask, social distance, because they don't know. How do you fight what you don't know? And so it's more to it than that. They take what's worked in the past and they're trying various things. But the way that's right can be the way of death, because man does not know. And this is a revelation for you. When the coronavirus is done, guess what? Something else is going to come down the pike that they've never seen before. And the whole thing starts all over. Isn't it great to know Jehovah, who created us from dust, and He knows what's best for us? He has no dartboard. He has no trial and error. He just tells us what works. But man cannot do that. That's what's wrong with humanism. It puts man on the level of God, and man just keeps on demonstrating time after time after time. We don't know what we're doing. What even worked for years and years isn't working anymore. You farmers, you got Roundup ready crops. How's that working out for you? You spray Roundup all over your crops, and what's it do? Kills the weeds. All of them? No. Why? Because those weeds are smarter than you. They say, we're going to just vary a little bit, and whoop, here we are again. Go ahead and spray Roundup on us. We drink that stuff for breakfast. So you send out a guy with a hoe, because that doesn't work anymore. You see what I'm saying? Man just is not God. We can't make those things. We are not the highest surveyor of life. Think of the human perspective versus the divine perspective. Let me give you an example. 1 Samuel chapter 16 and verse 7. 1 Samuel 16 and verse 7. The Lord said to Samuel who had been sent to the house of Jesse to pick the next king. Now, if God sent him, He ought to know the criteria, and He ought to know how to pick a king, right? So He says, march them boys out here, and I'll pick the king. The Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or at his physical stature, because I have refused him. Now Samuel said, ding, 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 we have a winner. And God said, no. And here's why. 1 Samuel 16:7b. For the Lord does not see as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Human perspective versus divine perspective. And guess what? We will never, ever change that, folks. You cannot see my heart, and I cannot see your heart. Even my beloved that I've been with 35 years, I can't see her heart. Just when I think I have it figured out, I don't. She can't see my heart. Nobody can see each other's hearts, but God does. That's why there's a difference. That's why there's a way that seems right to man, but its end is death because we can't look where we need to look. Isaiah 46 and verse 9. Remember the former things of old, for I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning. Is there a scientist around that can tell us what the end of the coronavirus will look like? There must not be, because I've been around a lot of medical people lately, keeping appointments. I've asked my PCP, I've asked the MRI tech, I've asked the X-ray tech, I've asked Marilyn, the infusion nurse. I've asked everybody, what's the end of this going to look like? You know what they all do? They all do the same thing. I don't know. All of them. These are people that have degrees that I'm paying an enormous amount of money for their opinion. They say, I don't know. They don't know. At least they're honest. Because they can't know. There's some things that are not in the human perspective. Acts chapter 2 and verse 23 has a neat word. As Peter talked to these people that had killed Jesus, he said, him, that is Jesus, being delivered by the determined purpose and foreknowledge of God, you've taken by lawless hands, have crucified and put to death. Foreknowledge of God, what's that? Have you got any foreknowledge? Because I must confess, I do not. I don't have any foreknowledge, but God does. He has foreknowledge. You can figure out what that means just from the two words, can't you? He has knowledge before of things that will come after. He has foreknowledge and we don't. Deuteronomy chapter 10 and verse 17. I'm really enjoying myself and the time's going by. I don't know how y'all are doing, but I'm way behind anyway. Deuteronomy 10 verse 17. For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality nor takes a bribe. Now, do you know anybody who in their heart of hearts can say, I would never, ever make a decision based on being partial? You know, I remember when I coached Little League, and I rode my son as hard as I could to try to keep somebody from pointing their finger at me saying, well, you're just giving him special treatment. I probably went too far the other way. But can anybody in their heart of hearts say, I would never do anything from partiality? We can't, but God does. He never is partial. James chapter 1 and verse 13. Let no one say when he's tempted, I'm tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil. You see the divine perspective versus the human perspective? That's why Jeremiah, the prophet, says, it is not in man that walks to direct his own steps. It's because there's a way that seems right. Your steps want to go this way, and it leads to death. Let me keep going. Sincerity does not stop consequences. So I've looked around, I've made choices, and I'm very sincere in my choice. And so I'm going to take this path. Does that stop the consequences? When I was a little kid, I remember the first time that I watched, what's her name? Julie Andrews, and she had the umbrella and all that stuff, you know. Mary Poppins, thank you. And so I saw that she could fly with an umbrella. So I knew we had an umbrella. And so I went out on the garage roof and I thought, if she can fly up, you know, this should be a piece of cake. And I sprained my ankle. I was very sincere in doing it. I thought sure that umbrella would slow my descent. It did not. And so the ground came very quickly and consequences followed. Didn't matter how sincere that I was. Now, in 2 Samuel chapter 6, and in verses 6 and 7, here you have the Ark of the Covenant loaded onto a cart, and as the cart's being pulled along, the oxen stumble, and it looks like the ark is going to fall. And it says, when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. Then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error, and he died there by the ark of God. Now that seems awfully harsh. Do you think he was sincere in doing something that he thought was good? I think so. Now, in Numbers chapter 14 and verse 15, God had said, if you kill these people as one man, then the nation... That's not right either. Who wrote my notes? Oh, Numbers 4 and verse 15. Numbers 4 and verse 15. When Aaron and his sons have finished covering the sanctuary and all the furnishings of the sanctuary, when the camp is set to go, then the sons of Kohath shall come to carry them. God gave some instructions. Deuteronomy 31 and verse 9. So Moses wrote this law and delivered it to the priests, the sons of Levi, who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Now there's some instructions. 1 Chronicles chapter 15 and verse 15, 14. So the priests and the Levites sanctified themselves to bring up the ark of the Lord God of Israel. So here's several passages that show you what God had in mind. The Levites, the sons of Kohath, he wanted them bearing the ark and only on the poles of acacia wood that he had asked them to make. So sincerity didn't stop the impending consequences. Now this is very observable in the material world. If you invest money and you do it sincerely, you've done your homework and everything, but the stock goes bust, does it matter how sincere that you were? Have you all ever done any research on the Titanic and how sincere they were in the plans of it and the building of it and all of that, and yet that thing went down in the water like an old man getting in a hot bathtub? They said it couldn't do it. Said it was unsinkable. They were very sincere. But that didn't matter. The impending consequences came anyway. I think there are people now walking down pathways that they believe are right in religion and faith and philosophies. It doesn't matter how sincere I am. If the end is wrong, it's wrong, and the consequences are coming. And lastly, a wrong choice can lead to death. You know, like our story out there in the woods, a person that could eventually die out there if they make the wrong choice. If you make the wrong choice in this life, many times it leads to death. If you're driving a vehicle and you disregard the signs, you make a wrong turn, it can very likely end up in injury or death. Drugs and alcohol can lead to death. People have seen that a homosexual lifestyle can lead to death, and now there are drug companies trying to help you avoid those consequences, and yet it leads to death. But, you know, physical death is one thing, and it's sin and taking our own way can lead to that. That's true. But there's something that's much more important and something that's much more final and devastating. In Ephesians chapter 2, as that chapter begins, Paul says, "You he made alive who were dead in trespasses and sins." And so by grace we've been saved through faith. But we were dead in trespasses and sins. No hope of eternal life until Jesus came and gave us hope. That kind of death is much to be feared. In Revelation 21 and verse 8, the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second what? Death. You know, you can survive the first death. I'm not talking about, there's a lot of examples of people that their heart has stopped, their brain waves have stopped, and they've come back to live. I'm not talking about that. All of us eventually, our hearts are going to stop and our brain waves are going to stop. There's no getting around that. But you can survive that because that's the first death. And God has provided a way that you can be made alive again and live in heaven throughout all eternity. But the second death is for those who do not take advantage of the blood of Jesus, who then go the way that they think is right, and then they find no sacrifice for sin, and so there is the second death, which is the lake which burns with fire and brimstone. It is eternal. The worm does not die. There's weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's the second death. And guess what? The Bible offers no recovery from that. Anyone, listen to me carefully, anyone who experiences the second death will never, ever, ever be saved from it. Now, we're all going to experience the first death, but we can be saved from that. God has made a way. And so, what way do we take? There's a way that seems right. I'm going to tell you, the Bible tells us a way that not only seems right, but is right. Jesus told the apostles, where I'm going, you know, and the way you know. And Thomas said, Lord, we do not know where you're going. How can we know the way? And Jesus answered, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Do you want to go see the Father? Do you want to live eternally with the Father? Then here is the way. It goes through Jesus. If you've not yet come to Jesus, confessed your faith in Him, repented and been baptized in His name, become His disciple, then you need to find the way. If you have questions, if you'd like to talk more about it, if we can assist you in doing that, please let your needs be made known right now while we stand and sing.
If you are tired of the load of your sin, let Jesus come into your heart.